Good afternoon, everybody. Deb Noller. I'm the CEO of Switch Automation. Our company develops smart building solutions for buildings that are becoming smarter. And with me today, we've got Scott Phillips and Darlene Pope. Scott, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Scott Phillips. I'm Director of Corporate Real Estate with McDonald's Corporation here in Chicago. We've just passed the 1-year anniversary of our new headquarters in the West Loop. About 500,000 square feet, 2,400 employees, full-time contractors, and have engaged a significant amount of technology, smart building components that we'll spend a little bit of time talking about this afternoon.
And I'm Darlene Pope. Oh, is this not on? Now I'm Darlene Pope. No, I'm still not. There we go. Darlene Pope, I'm the Vice President and Global Head of Smart Buildings and Digital Workplace for WeWork. So if you have any questions about WeWork, I'd be happy to answer them accurately. Prior to that, I spent 3.5 years running the Smart Building program for JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle, globally. So I've worked with probably 40 or 50 corporate clients around the world in designing smart buildings and digital workplaces, and look forward to sharing some of those experiences with you.
Thanks. And full disclosure, we're members of WeWork in Denver. So if you want to know any, ask any questions about being a member of WeWork, I'm happy to answer those. So we're here to talk about smart building technologies and how they are used for the benefit or otherwise of the occupier. So I just want to start with a quick question to our two panelists. I'm going totally off script already. When you think about smart buildings, Scott, what do you think about when you think about a smart building? What's your definition of a smart building?
So I'll talk to how we think in terms of smart building at McDonald's, and that's really an opportunity to use the technology that we're able to build into the building to drive business results. And some of those business drivers, business results may be around the efficiency of the use of the space, so more of the traditional corporate real estate component of that. But what we found, and as we've talked about smart building, so much more of that is around building a culture and building an environment where we're promoting this notion of technology and innovation, and we're using those systems that we put in place in the building that are providing comfort and convenience to our employees and driving that employee experience. We've used that to really drive the culture forward. So as we think about what we're trying to accomplish in our restaurants, it has a direct correlation. So we're engaging in more and more technology and more innovation in how we connect with our customers. Therefore, we want to ensure that we're really creating that type of an environment where our employees see that innovation and that technology highlighted as well.
So nothing about the buildings.
There's a piece of it that's about buildings, but it's really, we found that it's more about building that culture for us.
Mm-hmm. And Darlene, how does WeWork, and how do you particularly, because you've had a long history of and a very great career in smart building technologies, how do you think about smart buildings?
So I would say that a smart building is a building that responds to the real-time needs of the occupants and the business needs of the owner. It's not about the technology, it's about the use cases and the business drivers and what are we trying to accomplish? How do we create that environment? How do we create a community? How do we use technology as the enabler? So when we were prepping for this call, I'd mentioned that, other than Scott, I'm probably, one of the only people on the planet that has every single vendor trying to sell me something without even asking me what are my business needs, right? So when we look at corporate clients, we look at WeWork in particular. WeWork has 451 locations all around the world. We have over 400,000 members. 1/3 of the Fortune 500 companies have membership at WeWork, and they use WeWork locations. So what we're seeing is a complete, you want to talk about disrupting CRE, a complete disruption of traditional business models within the real estate world. And if you look at what's happened to traditional industries, such as the transportation industry, right? The 2 largest transportation companies don't own any cars. The largest hospitality companies don't own any hotel rooms. I'm talking about Lyft, Uber, Airbnb, if you're not following that. And some of the largest, now one of the largest real estate companies doesn't own any space. So when you look at space as a service, when you look at all these disruptive trends that are taking place in the world, and how does So how do smart building technologies and how do smart buildings enable that business model? It's all about data, it's all about getting real-time information, but at the end of the day, it's all about meeting the needs of the occupants and the business needs of the owner.
So the business use cases for smart building technologies, what would WeWork put at top of their list for the, you know, the what's driving their adoption of smart building technologies?
Top of the list, there's several on the top of the list. Attract and retain top talent, worker productivity, engagement, satisfaction and happiness, health and wellness. You know, if you look at all the business drivers for why people are investing in technology for the workplace, those are among the top on the list. And it used to be smart buildings was all about energy management, right? You want to integrate all your building systems, make the building more efficient, contribute to energy management, sustainability, check the box, and you know, there's only so much you can invest in technology to reduce that energy consumption before you reach diminishing returns, right? So it's no longer just about energy management, it's about management of space. Having a very efficient use of space. You know, if you're a client with a 10 million square foot portfolio and you're at 62% occupancy across that portfolio, you can get rid of a lot of space, or you can use that space better. So using data and smart building technologies to really have a more efficient use of space is, again, a huge business driver. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to employee experience, productivity, satisfaction, creating a community. And WeWork, I heard a lot of different opinions about WeWork and co-working and all that. WeWork is not just a co-working company. I mean, we have WeWork, We Live, We Grow. WeWork is a community. WeWork is about creating a community that allows people to feel that they are part of something bigger than themselves. They are part of we. And through that, we're creating environments where they can be efficient and productive and happy and healthy and all the other things that go along with that. And that ultimately drives better business and better value to the members that are members of WeWork.
Cool. Scott, how important was user experience when you were assessing technologies and working out which technologies you were going to adopt and implement?
Sure, I would say user experience was at the top of our list as we evaluated smart building technologies. And as you think about user experience, let me take you to the restaurant side of our business first. And so user experience is about customer experience on the external facing side of our brand. It's about employee experience on the internal side, but on the customer side, we are evolving as a company. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've launched our mobile app. The engagement in the mobile app has been hugely successful. We're driving mobile order, mobile pay out of the mobile app. We're driving new technologies around the technology with the mobile app around the experience in the restaurant. So you walk into a restaurant now, over half of our restaurants in the US have what we call our experience of the future. It's kiosk enabled, so if you choose to engage from that standpoint, you can personalize your orders from there. You can pay there. It's about digital menu boards. It's about looking at how we better utilize the drive-through from a technology standpoint around curbside service. So being able to place an order, and once you approach and break that geofence within that restaurant, you're prompted as to whether you want to place the order that you've already arranged online and paid for, and so you can completely bypass the drive-through and go to curbside, and they'll bring the order out to you. It's looking at McDelivery. Using technology again in our partnership with Uber Eats. We have over half of our global restaurants now feature McDelivery service. In the US alone, 75% of the US population is within 3 miles of a McDonald's restaurant. So you think about the opportunity that unlocks, but it's all unlocked using technology to do that. We have, just over the last couple of months, have purchased what was a startup company essentially on the AI side of technology called Dynamic Yield. And with Dynamic Yield, we're looking at how can we use the technology that they're driving to continue to enhance that customer experience, whether it's in our restaurants or via the technology that they're engaging the brand with. So thinking in terms of if I drive up to the drive-through And based on all of the data that we've collected for that particular location, based on the weather that happens to be that day, we can do suggestive selling around those types of elements, as well as personalizing it to the individual. So, that's a pretty broad snapshot of what we're doing from a customer standpoint, but you can see how technology enables all of that, and it's all about the customer experience. And so let's pull that back to our headquarters and back to space. When we're trying to drive all of this customer engagement on the customer-facing side, we also wanted to create a space that would engage our employees, that would provide that same level of experience and would focus on innovation and technology as it relates to the headquarters. What we have put in place is a mobile app that provides a level of comfort and convenience. You can navigate through the office, you can book a conference room, you can get information on the shuttle that's leaving to the train station. You can adjust the temperature in your work area or in your conference room. And so all of these different engagement opportunities are really designed to continue to drive that evolution, that cultural change for McDonald's, and focusing on how do we bring that experience to our customer in the restaurants.
Very good. So I want to focus on, we're one of the vendors in the prop tech ecosystem, and one of the questions or one of the big hurdles that we always have to overcome whenever we're talking to a new client is the ROI. So what would you say, Darlene, about when you think about ROI, and particularly now in your new role as heading up, technologies and adoption of technologies, not just for WeWork, but for WeWork clients. What are you going to talk about when the customer says, what's the ROI on that?
So ROI, again, it depends upon which stakeholder you're talking to in terms of how they define ROI. And I go back to, is it energy, is it space, is it people? For the most part, when we're looking at defining and measuring ROI, it's going to be around that employee experience or that member experience. So for WeWork, the ROI for us to invest in technology for our workplaces is, getting more members. And how does the technology impact the experience of that member, and how can we, sell more memberships? In terms of working with enterprise clients, the value to enterprise clients or to corporate clients like a McDonald's is in how can you, how do you measure the improvement in satisfaction and productivity and efficiency of the workplace? And Scott mentioned the mobile app. I was speaking at a conference a couple months ago, and they asked me, what do I think the most disruptive technology will be in the next 5 years in the workplace? And I said, mobile apps. For several reasons. A, because we're a very mobile society, and every single person right now probably has their hand on their mobile app, and they're probably using it. Number two is instant access to data and information. So through that mobile app, you can access everything instantaneously, and we depend on that. And number three is location-based services. So when you fly into a city and it says, welcome to Chicago, you're near 5 highly rated restaurants, and you use your GPS and everything's tracking, everything's tracking you. We don't apply those same technologies in the workplace. So when you look at the use of mobile apps in the workplace, you want to talk about ROI, it's about efficiency, it's about real-time data, it's about mobility, it's about creating that mobile, productive workplace. I mean, we have technologies now where you can literally book a room by walking into it. And you can change your temperature because your profile knows what temperature you like, and so when you walk into your office, it sets the lights and the temperature the way you like it. So we've got location-based services, we've got mobile apps, we've got real-time data. So ROI is, you have to work with each client and each member to define what are the metrics and KPIs of the things that they're trying to accomplish, and how does technology help them accomplish all of those goals?
And some of those things are really hard to measure. Scott, do you mind sharing the story that you told me? Scott gave me a tour of the McDonald's headquarters yesterday, and it's extremely impressive. I was wondering if you'd mind sharing the story about your staff retention and what your expectations were around moving closer to the city and moving some of your key staff closer to perhaps more lucrative jobs, and what the headquarters actually did.
Sure. And so, just to touch on the ROI piece a little bit, and then, we'll get to that piece. When you think about ROI, traditionally it's been a notion of, how much return can I get? And we're certainly looking at that from a just an energy efficiency standpoint as an example. So with our temperature control smart building component, giving the personal adjustability to the temperature, we're collecting data. So we have 2,400 sensors in the building that are giving us data and feedback on that, and that's helping to inform what we can do in the way of deadband sets on our HVAC systems, and so that's ultimately driving energy efficiency, and so that's a very small piece of the ROI. That's more of the traditional notion of smart building. But when we think of on a more broader term basis, and I think as we talked yesterday, Deb, one of the questions that came up around ROI was, what's the ROI if you don't take that approach? What if you don't move in that direction? And so we look at that from a cultural standpoint and think back in terms of McDonald's 10 years ago. We did not have a digital platform. We were not connecting with employees from a technology standpoint in any meaningful way. And so as a result of that, we were starting to lose ground as a market leader that we had been in the QSR space. And so it was a necessity for us to be able to think in terms of technology, innovation, because that's what our customers expect. That's what they expect today. And certainly as we engage with a new generation, the millennial generation, they don't see the McDonald's brand like a 50-year-old or others may have seen the McDonald's brand in the past. Some of the other things that we looked at, and as Deb was mentioning, is for us, the move downtown from Oak Brook and suburban Chicago here was also about attracting talent. So if we're going to move in the direction of technology and innovation, we needed to bring in a different skill set, a different talent pool than what we had had in the past. And so the move into the city has really helped us to be able to do that. When we looked at the move, we looked at not only that as an advantage, but it also opens up the opportunity for, from a technology, from a presence standpoint, from a location standpoint, that we may lose some people in the end that may have opportunities now that they didn't have when we were in the suburbs. And so what we found in the way of the headquarters and the success of the project, and one of our measures is that some of the modeling that we did up front, 5, 10, 15% additional loss in the move downtown, we've really seen incremental, less than 5% as far as losses in employees that have moved on to other opportunities. And so we definitely attribute that to the fact that we are creating a space that people want to be, that they're able to do their best work in, and we definitely feel as though the technology and the experience that we've created through the technologies is helping to drive that.
Yeah, awesome. Because I love to always say that to back to people is, what's the ROI of not doing this? Can you really afford to be the last company on the planet to adopt smart building technologies? And particularly if you're going into, if we're talking to some of the services companies that are now starting to digitize their business and move into a digital model. So let's talk about risk and failure, because smart building technologies, innovation, it always creates an element of failure. And I know that we've all seen that. Was there any technologies that didn't work out as well as you were hoping when you did your headquarters? And how did your company culture deal with that?
Me? You want me to start?
Yeah, I'll ask you.
Absolutely. So we moved into the smart building space along with trying to drive a significant workplace strategy change, a location change, dealing with change management around different commutes. So when we talk about disruption, DisruptCRE, we were disrupting our whole business. And so while that can be a negative, it can also be a very significant positive, because it gave us the opportunity to really try some things. To we're going to throw this onto the change management wagon, and so that's kind of the approach that we took with smart buildings in many cases. And so there were some things that were very effective out of the gate for us. Temperature control was one. Location-based services. So if you're running the app Location-based services knows where you're at in the building, corresponds with the HVAC box that's nearest you, and it gives a 5 to 10 minute blast of warmer or cooler air. Our employees loved it. Out of the gate, it's been a huge success. It's probably one of the most used components on our workplace app. Looking at utilization, on the other hand, and trying to get to that kind of holy grail of how many people are actually using a conference room, how many people are actually sitting in an open plan area. We looked at some things initially that tied to the mobile app and was going to drive utilization based on collecting that data via the mobile app. But what we found is our adoption rates on the mobile app were not nearly high enough to be able to accurately drive utilization. So we had to step back from that. We looked at how can we leverage some of the technology stack that we already have. In fact, this year, 10, 12 months later, we're still working through the process to get to a more accurate utilization count that will be driven based on actual population in those spaces.
Excellent. And Darlene, in your new role with WeWork, how are you going to engage with smaller companies and bring a culture of risk and risk appetite into that role? And maybe you could share with us your view on pilots and proof of concepts.
Sure. I hate pilots. I could, if I had $1 for every pilot I've done with clients, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. But no, I think pilots are good. I think you need to balance between being too risk heavy versus too risk averse, right? So there's got to be a balance in there somewhere, because we're not going to have change without risk, and somebody's got to be the first to do some of these deployments. I was fortunate enough when I was at JLL, the McDonald's headquarters was my biggest project, and we were fortunate to have a client like Scott that was very open to trying things that had literally never been done before. A lot of lessons learned that I'm going to take to my next client, so we don't repeat some of the same mistakes. But no, there are things that, yes, you need to pilot, but at a certain point you need to just say, let's do it. Pick a horse, go for it, and learn from it and try something new. I mean, we are in a very, very disruptive time in this space. Something like an indoor positioning system where you're able to facilitate blue dot wayfinding within the facility. Guess what? We didn't know it was going to drain the hell out of your battery in your mobile app. And so, you got about a good couple of hours and then you're dead, similar to your GPS in the car. Doing pilots of sensor, you'd end up with 4 or 5 different sensors in a room, picking, similar data points and sending them to individual point solutions. So I think, when you take a step back and how do we reduce and mitigate the risk of making mistakes, right? My number one recommendation is to start with a visioning session of what do you want to do, and write a master plan that's a full integration strategy, and I'm talking end-to-end technology strategy that will help you integrate all the things that you want to do. Everything from access control, elevator dispatch, HVAC, lighting control, CCTV, room booking, indoor positioning, mobile apps, visitor management, work order management, all of those tools and technologies that need to be integrated if you really want to create that seamless experience that everybody seems to want to be able to create. So you may not be able to deploy all of the components of that master plan day one, but you got to write the plan first, because you don't want to be buying a room booking platform that doesn't integrate with the lighting system, or you don't want an access control system that's collecting occupancy data with scan-ins for badge data, but nobody's scanning out. So you've got sensor data under desks that has different data than your badge swipe data, and it's a mess. And you're collecting multiple data sources that don't match, and you're sending them here and you're sending them there. So I would strongly recommend sit down and write that master plan first of what do you want to do and how do all these things integrate, and that will help mitigate the risk of buying technologies that are never going to communicate with anything else. So if you really want to take advantage of the power of IoT, write the plan, design the strategy, write your network architecture, your data topology, do all that first, and then put together a roadmap of deploying that over time.
Sounds like a pretty good plan. Scott, who do you need to bring to the table in your organization to help get everybody on board? And,
Yeah, so-
and who externally can you lean on?
Yeah, so it's both an internal and external question, I believe. And for us, McDonald's, we were moving from owned facilities in Oak Brook to a leased facility downtown. So one of the things that is not to be overlooked is the critical nature of bringing your landlord into that conversation as it relates to base building systems and having a strategy around the communications network that you're going to put in place that's going to help to drive all of this integration that you're trying to accomplish. So when we start to talk about elevator integration, turnstile integration, we talk about HVAC, which base building systems belong to the landlord. We talk about lighting. All of those are landlord-based building systems that, have an opportunity around smart building, but the landlord has control in many cases. And what is the traditional landlord doing? They're looking at, here's my lighting vendor, here's my elevator vendor, here's my turnstile vendor, and they're not talking to each other, nor are they creating a network that allows for that. So, making sure that to the extent that you're looking to engage in integrations of technology in those ways, that the landlord is part of that discussion. Obviously, IT is a huge component. As you think about network security, that's a topic that gets a lot of discussion as it relates to the facilities end and exposure from an IT security standpoint. So we brought the IT group in very early on in the process as we looked at smart building technologies. And I could go right on down the list. HR, communications, legal. From a privacy standpoint, there were some aspects of our workplace app that included Find a Colleague as an opportunity for us to implement. And as we looked at that a little further, this whole notion of Big Brother overseeing, watching your every move, knowing where you've been, how long you spent there, we wanted to make sure that we avoided as much of that perception as possible. While the data is generally anonymized, there's a perception still that exists there. So I think all of those different groups have a play in a successful smart building implementation.
Mm-hmm. So bring all the stakeholders along.
Yes.
Keep them informed regularly, I guess, and have a master plan. Any other clues, hints, tips for people that are starting on this journey?
Well, I think, the number one group that needs to be in that meeting in the stakeholders is IT. The client, the members' IT group, the landlord's IT, the client, the corporate enterprise client's IT group, because what we're looking at here is an IT overlay into traditional building operations and traditional enterprise operations to get those systems to communicate with each other seamlessly. And that's what ultimately creates the experience. And so, to add to the question earlier, from a WeWork perspective, what are we delivering to our members? How does technology deliver that experience to our members? And I think it needs to be invisible to the end user, because people don't notice when things are working seamlessly and efficiently. They notice when they're not. Right? So when you walk into a building and you have to wait 5 minutes for an elevator, you're going to notice that, right? When you walk in and the elevator's there because it knows that when you swipe your badge in, it automatically dispatches an elevator. Or when you pull into the parking garage, it automatically pulls the elevator down to the P3 level. Or when you can take occupancy data and send it to the elevator system so the elevators are parking on floors that are more heavily occupied. Or when the elevators start learning traffic patterns and they know between the hours of 11:30 and 2 that we've got a lot of traffic coming out of the building and I know what floors I need to go to. And so those are the types of things that are happening behind the scenes that are enabled by the technology that nobody knows is going on behind the scenes, right? So it's invisible to the end user, but it adds tremendous value. And that's the experience that we want to create. We want to create an experience with technology that people don't necessarily notice, but what's best is that they will notice if it's not there. So the other differentiator for WeWork is, we're a global company. We've got 450 locations. We are operating at a massive, massive scale. So for clients who have, offices over the world that are global clients, they're looking for that global consistency. So in the same way with McDonald's, if you order a Big Mac in Tokyo, you're going to get the same thing as if you order a Big Mac in Chicago. right? Having that ability to scale at a massive level and be able to provide these types of services and this type of experience consistently across the world, I think is a major, major differentiator for WeWork.
It's an enormous problem for both of you. I mean, how many restaurants do you potentially have that you could roll technologies and both think about it quite differently?
But I think where technology comes in is we couldn't accomplish that massive amount of scale and that consistent experience without technology, without data. I mean, we have 400,000 members. Think of the data that we're collecting from how space is used. Not just literally on a day-to-day basis, on a real-time basis, understanding use of space. That's incredible information for us to be able to create the next generation of workspaces and the next generation and continue to evolve based on the patterns and the needs and the demands that we're seeing from our members.
Yeah, I think about some of the lessons that we've gained some knowledge around as we've gone through the process. And while we talk about master planning, we talk about putting the right systems in place that best match your business drivers. I think the other encouragement would be to ensure that you don't forget about day two. So what happens when the project implementation team is left and all of a sudden the systems aren't working quite as everyone said they would work? So we're a year into that, and so some of the things that we've done to ensure that we continue to gain value in the expectations around those systems. We've put different skill sets in place from a corporate real estate standpoint. So we have a smart building systems administrator that's a part of my corporate real estate team now. And so when we talk about bringing IT to the table, well, we are bringing that language of IT to the corporate real estate team. And so, and that was a very difficult position to find from a skill set standpoint, as someone that had some IT background knowledge, had some controls knowledge, understood kind of the goals of our CRE team, but very important position to ensure that, going forward, that systems will function as they're designed to. And then the other thing I would say that, as we think differently about corporate real estate in the new environment is data. When we've all talked about data, and unless you have a very focused effort to capture that data and put it into a format that's usable for you, that will allow you to drive to decisions that are based on that data, the data is going to be worthless. And so we have added a data analyst to our corporate real estate team, and that's really their sole focus is dashboarding, putting together all of the metrics around the data that we're collecting that enables us to make informed decisions based on that data to really, if we talk about ROI, that's the only way you're going to be able to get to an ROI there. So those couple of things are critical in my mind as far as ensuring the success of a smart building program.
So, Darlene, 6 weeks in, when you go to work on Monday, what's top of mind and what's the first thing that you're going to be thinking about when you're thinking about smart building technologies and what you're going to be adopting?
One thing I did want to point out is to this point about the ongoing need to be able to to keep those systems up to speed. My group actually falls within the digital facility management group at WeWork. And my title is Global Head of Smart Buildings and Digital Workplace Experience. And the reason I think that's important is because now everything's digital. It's all about data. So if you look at, we used to call it facility management, now we call it digital workplace experience. So the nomenclature is important here because everything's about collecting data. Everything's about, it's not facilities anymore, it's the workplace. And it's not about the physical space, it's about the experience of that physical space. So when I go to work on Monday, actually I got to fly to New York tonight, but when I go in on Monday, WeWork is a very, very dynamic company. A lot of really smart IT, data-driven type of people, and it's really all about, I find it fascinating because I've been there 6 weeks, and every single week, every single day is different. When I was prepping for this in terms of, okay, how many locations do we have and how many members do we have, they had to update me 3 times in the last 10 days in terms of number of members and number of locations. That's how quickly this space is moving. So very, very dynamic, very progressive, very high tech, very data driven. So to be at WeWork and look forward to going to work every Monday and literally looking at how we can change the world. I mean, that's part of the company's mission statement, is really impacting and changing the world and creating a workplace where people work to make a living, people work to make a life, not just a living. That's it.
Do you think digital FM means
Rewind that. Yeah.
People are going to lose jobs?
Do
you think there's going to be jobs go from digitizing? When you say digital, do you think that means people should be worried about losing their jobs?
No, I think to Scott's point, it's a change in skill sets. Traditional building engineers need to learn a little bit about data and analytics, and we need to be able to create very user-friendly dashboards so that we can take that data and provide it to them in a way that they understand. If you look at even your GPS that everybody uses just about every day, does anybody here understand how much data and how much analytics and how much is going on behind the scenes to give you a very simple blue dot that moves along the road and red traffic up ahead? The key here is there's going to be different skill sets. You need to have those IT people and the cybersecurity. The panel we had earlier on cybersecurity is absolutely critical. So definitely new skill sets, data analysts, network architects, network managers, people that understand how all this works behind the scenes. But then for those traditional FM or engineers, being able to give them the data they need to help them do their jobs better in a manner that they understand.
Yeah. And Scott, for you, Monday, what's next?
Yeah, I think the most exciting and the most maddening thing about technology is the fact that what I did 12 months ago is old news, and and there's 2, 3, 4 different new technologies that have eclipsed that, and so we're continuing to look at just as we are in the restaurant technology side, we're continuing to look at how do we take that experience to the next level, and what does that mean? So if it's a workplace app today that you're engaging with, how do you integrate voice services into that? How do I tell my workplace app that I have a meeting in the Big Mac conference room and show me how to get there? Or better yet, thinking even a little further down the road, how does that app know that I have a meeting in the Big Mac conference room and it asks me if I would like directions to be able to get there? So I think it's looking at what is the next evolution of that experience, whether it's on the employee side in our headquarters, in our field offices, in our global offices, or is it in the customer restaurant side of the business?
Yeah, one thing I would add to that is this industry changes so quickly because it's all technology based, right? And so I think being able to put in place a platform that has the ability to scale and the ability to grow and the ability to support future technologies is absolutely critical as well. So when you're looking at, one-off point solutions, again, you got to go back to that master plan and figure out what is the platform we want to base our future on so that we can continue to grow and we can continue to expand.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big trends we're seeing, is that people are absolutely understanding that the data is the most valuable thing, and that the revenue models that are going to drive off that data are unknown, but they need to be collecting that data in a way where they're controlling the hosting and the ownership of that data, the security of that data. So we've got somebody who's actually done it and somebody who is one of the premier experts in her field. Anybody got any questions that you want to ask while we've got these amazing people up here? How to digitize your workforce?
I wanted to ask, especially for WeWork, we know right now in the commercial office space general, I actually work for Connected Real Estate Magazine, I had a question. We know that for the most part, density is obviously something that all corporate occupiers are looking at very intensely. But is there some other type of data that you think will be very relevant to the commercial real estate sector, specifically, Darlene, that you think that is really important for landlords and owners to be looking at right now?
So the question, if I understand it, is we all know sensor data is important, but what other data contributes and enriches that data set?
Yeah, well, density is more about occupancy within the space, right? So commercial real estate owners are able to figure out they maybe only use 60% of the building, and then how do they better monetize? But beyond that, because that seems to be much of the focus right now, what other types of data do you think is really relevant for a building owner to be looking at for commercial real estate
So I think what's really important about occupancy data or density or whatever you want to call it is, that data is so important for multiple uses, and people seem to only be looking at it for space management. And I talked about earlier, just even dispatching elevators or running the HVAC system based on real-time occupancy and understanding, when people leave for lunch, if you look at the occupancy curve of a building versus the operational curve of a building, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity right there for savings. Some of the other things around occupancy, if you can start to predict what your occupancy is going to be like tomorrow based on trends and analytics and understanding use of space, you can start to then feed that data to the cleaning company and feed it to the caterers and feed it to the cafeteria, so you order less chicken on a Friday than you do on a Monday. Now you fast forward where you really start to take advantage of that data, and you can start to actually run a building and open up floors based on what your predicted occupancy is going to be like. So where I see a company like WeWork really being able to take advantage of that when we take a look at flex space and co-working is if you don't have an assigned desk and you've got a 10-story building, you literally just open up floors as you need them based on the prediction of your occupancy tomorrow. So if you know on a Friday you're going to be 40%, you only open up 4 or 5 floors of that building. You can do dynamic assignment of neighborhoods. You could do so it's a combination of all of the above. It's a combination of the data, it's a combination of the analytics, it's a combination of looking at occupancy and being able to put the technologies in to enable all of that so you've got absolute best use of space.
Very good. Thank you very much. I think we've got one more question.
Darlene, you mentioned starting with a visioning statement when you were talking about getting a platform and the technology and everything else. How do you balance coming up with all those objectives and pie-in-the-sky ideas and not suffering from paralysis by analysis and actually getting people to move forward saying, this is a success if we get 60% of these things accomplished with this one app or two and move forward?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I've typically approached that with clients is to put together a visioning session where you define what are you trying to accomplish, not what technologies are we going to buy and what vendors we're going to partner with, but what do you want to accomplish, and then start to map each of those components against your business objectives. So does this contribute to employee productivity? Does it contribute to energy management? Does it contribute to health and wellness? And help the client really put together, here's what we want to accomplish and here's how it contributes to our business goals. And then when you take a look at which ones are you going to deploy first, you want to deploy the ones that contribute to all of your business goals first, right? So taking a look at rolling that out based on your budget, based on your business drivers, based on what you want to accomplish. And not every technology is going to be applicable for every space, right? So indoor positioning and wayfinding isn't going to be applicable for a 20,000 square foot facility, but it might be for a 500,000 square foot facility. So I really think it's a matter of mapping out what do you want to accomplish, how does that contribute to your business drivers, and then figure out what you're going to deploy first based on your budget.
Scott, Darlene, thank you so much for joining us today. Great discussion, and look forward to continuing it.